Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Loki, Season 2, Episode 2. Great episode. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, so first and foremost, I love that opening. Obviously, they're looking for Sylvie. Specifically, they're looking for Dachshund as well as Hunter X5, and because obviously we haven't been able to find any of them since then. So Loki and Mobius and B-15 are in London, 1977. And I love that little line at the bottom where it said like Sacred Timeline. I was like, right. Because jumping ahead a little bit, we find out that that Sylvie was on a branch. But I thought that's so interesting that they made that distinction, because it's like, right, you kind of have to, when there's so many branching timelines right now, you have to specify like, all right, this is on the Sacred Timeline. But yeah, they went after X5, and apparently he's a movie star, and it's like, oh, so he abandoned his mission to kind of live a life, which is so interesting last episode, because he was acting like, yes, I'm someone that's so determined, I'm all about this life. And that's the thing that Mobius couldn't wrap his hand around. It's like, why would you, someone who is so dedicated to this mission, who's just kind of like, who cares about what lives we could have led, and yada yada, so on and so forth, like, this is about the mission. But that's kind of the point, but we'll get there soon enough. I do like the whole chase sequence. I think this season's going to do a really interesting thing where it's like, it felt like this episode in particular felt like a crime drama. I mean, we had elements of it in season 1, because obviously it's like an overarching mystery and stuff, but like getting to see the TVA like fully in action, we've gotten bits and pieces of it, but this episode, it was just like, yo, all hands on deck, we're investigating. It felt like a cop show, legitimately, especially like interrogations. I mean, once again, we got that, but it's like our characters were on the other side of it. Now, like, Loki's working with, like, we're getting even more B-15. We're apparently getting a lot more Casey, which is dope. I love that he's popping up, so I'm assuming we're going to get a little more of him throughout the season as well, but I just like the vibe and feel of this show. This one episode in particular, I couldn't help but feel like, man, this feels like a cop show in this particular episode. But it's like, because I'd say like the last episode that felt like this was probably episode 2, because that's where you did the most investigating, because I mean, maybe that's kind of the parallel that we're going for, because episode 2 is when Loki figured out where Sylvie, obviously before they found out about Sylvie, it's like where the other variant is hiding. It's hiding in an apocalypse. So like it feels very befitting for it. That is kind of interesting too. I didn't even think about that. I mean, obviously Sylvie popped up at the end of last episode, but Loki runs into Sylvie again, episode 2. When did he first officially meet Sylvie? Episode 2 of last season. So I was like, that felt like that had to be on purpose, or maybe just, I don't know if that was completely by design, but I think that's just kind of an interesting thing to think about. But, also, I love that we are expanding upon Loki's powers. Like, he's using his powers in ways that we haven't really gotten to see, like, in the movies. Like, obviously, he's always been the dude of illusions, but, like, the way he's really applying that. I feel like the only other time we've really seen him kind of really go this far, especially, like, when he's using his illusions, like the Screw of Brad with all those, and he's like, stop using your magic and fight fair. And Loki's like, this isn't a fair fight. It's not meant to be a fair fight. But, like, all those people, cause I was actually kind of scared for Brad when he was surrounded by all those, I guess, quote unquote hooligans. I was like, I legitimately thought like, oh man, are you about to get beat up in the 70s? It's like, oh no, they're all illusions by Loki. What I was about to say is, it reminds me of episode 3 of What If, where like Loki had all those fake, oh god. All those fakes that he was using when he was fighting, Hank. Like, it kind of reminded me of that. Either way, it's just, even the fact is, when he used his shadows to grab Brad, I was like, ooh, I love that. And he's like, oh, I think, I forgot the line that Mobius said, but he was almost like, don't you think these theatrics are a little much? He's like, nah, I think it's just about right, or whatever. So they brought him in. I even love, B-15 talking to Casey, and it's like, have you found Renslayer? He's like, oh, you mean that tracking her thing? So she's like, why are you whispering? He's like, isn't this a secret mission? Renslayer killed X-20, locked me up, tried to kill Mobius, tried to take over the TVA. Why would that be a secret mission? And he's like, right. So he's having a hard time tracking her down, and he's the one that ended up figuring out the person that helped her was Miss Minutes, because she left Renslayer something at the end of the in episode that was episode was that episode 6? Yes, that was episode 6. Like he left her, Miss Minutes left her something, which obviously He Who Remains left her that, but once again, that's that timey-wiminess of it, of like so because she can't remember He Who Remains. Because once again, she must have had her memory wiped at some point in time, too. Like I said, I don't know if that was because that was all part of their plan to keep her there. And the best way to kind of lie to people is not knowing you're lying, because it's the truth to you, because your memory's been wiped. So I don't know. We still don't know what that is. There's a connection there. We just don't know. And I'm assuming, well, He Who Remains is dead now. So Casey does somehow track her down. So I can only assume she's somewhere on the main timeline, but probably not, because not every branch is dead. Quite a few are, but not every branch is dead by the end of the episode. Like I said, I'm jumping way ahead, but so she's got to be somewhere, because I think the timeline we saw her on was on a branch, like near the, like at the end of like what the line, what we saw, like quite a bit of ways on it, we saw like a branch off. So she's there. I don't know doing what. I love that they tried to talk to QB about looking into the TemPad, finding out like what Brad had done. Well, X5 or Brad had done to it, but it's like, oh, should I be working on this, or like the loom that's going to unravel and basically destroy everything? It's like no, work on that. That should continue to be your priority. But I love when they're fiddling with it, because it's like, oh, look at the handbook, and they're trying to figure stuff out. It's like, oh, but I already did the red light thing. So well, do it again. It's like, oh man, am I even on the right page? I like this, like, once again, just like in the nitty gritty of just like TBA work. Once again, we only got like one episode that really kind of allowed us to kind of see that, and we're kind of expanding upon that in this season, which I think is pretty dope. I know it's a comparison people probably don't want to be made. I think it's an apt comparison, but because I like the show, not everyone did. You can feel how you want to, but it gives me Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. type of vibes. For better or for worse for people. Like I said, for better for me, because I'm like, oh yeah, I love Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. I know that's not the case. Not everyone liked the show, but once again, to each their own, right? But it kind of gives me the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. vibe, where it's like, right, like, especially early on in this series, I mean, I'd even say it still kind of got that same vibe even the later seasons, because like early season things were usually like episodical things of like, it's adventure of the week, but obviously later season, it's like, yes, there's an overarching story, and these little like adventures are like building up to it, so on and so forth type of thing, right? I also, really quickly, since I was on the conversation about OB earlier, I love that Casey meets him later, and it's like, oh my God, wait, Boris, you're the one who made it. He's like, wait, you read it? He's like, yes, of course, I've read it back and forth, because he's the one that's actually read it, because that's why they were like, oh, the manual, because he's the one that's like, oh no, it doesn't block tracking or whatever. He knows, because he's read the manual back and forth to the point he's even got it memorized. He's even like, yo, can I get a signature? He's like, oh, of course. Can I get an autograph? It's like, of course. He's like, yeah, right here. And it's like, turns out OB can't open the shutters again, which is like, yeah, I have the device that can fix the loom and make it be able to compensate for the now extra massive amount of branches on the timeline. But it doesn't mean anything if we can't open it. The only person that can open it, it has to be a temporal signature, and that's by He Who Remains, but he's dead now. Which I was thinking to myself, I was like, yeah, because I was like, is that where the variants come into play? Is like, are you going to have to grab a variant? Because it's like, if we don't get Miss Minutes to come back here and override it, but then I was like, so the fact is, that's your suggestion, makes me go like, so that isn't why they run into Hero, like a variant of his. Obviously, as we saw in one of the post-credit scenes for Ant-Man and Wasp: Quantumania, like it was a scene from Loki. So they don't go after him. Could be other reasons why they go after him. But I was wondering, could it be they were going to go after variants just so they could have him? But I'm like, no, every person has their signature temporal energy. It's like a thumbprint, so even a variant wouldn't be able to open it. That's what I was wondering, though. I mean, maybe that still can apply, but it feels like that, since that wasn't even a suggestion, makes me think like, right, then it's not applicable in this case. I mean, it's also like, right, the devil's dead. Why are you going to go look for the other devils who are apparently much, much worse out there? So you're going to, why go looking for them, especially when they're coming your direction? There's that, but I think that is kind of answering the question of like, most likely, like, yes, temporal energy is like a thumbprint. Like none of He Who Remains other variants would ever be able to register in that same like temporal signature. So it would be a moot point. So it has to be Miss Minutes. She's the only one who's been by his side for this long to really know the ins and outs. Plus, she, being the AI system that she is. I mean, the TVA even talked about it. Casey was like, yeah, it takes longer to do stuff now, like tracking Renslayer, because Miss Minutes, like, expedited a lot of that because she was already like, she's AI programmed. She can run a lot of that stuff quickly. They're having to do a lot of stuff manually. So that's why things are kind of moving slowly. They've relied on Miss Minutes for so long. It's almost that conversation of like, yeah, you've relied on this AI for so long. Now you have to kind of go backwards to kind of handle things like very manually. That's the only way you're going to be able to get stuff done. And it's a slow process. But anyway, back to other elements of the episode, the interrogation of X5, and I thought was so interesting that he's like, Brad, because for him, it's like, I've kind of abandoned being Hunter X5. I'm Brad now. Recognize me as Brad. And obviously they're trying to get under his skin, but I even love, Mobius was like, yeah, don't let him get under your skin. And he kind of does. He didn't go in on B-15 like he did Loki and Mobius. Because for Loki, he was bringing up everything of like, right, you're not the hero. You're playing hero. What you really are is a villain. You're thinking by doing good, you could make up for all that you've done. But no, you've done many terrible things. You've done so many atrocities that there is no forgive. I mean, I think he has worked his way. I mean, we're also talking about, I mean, that's also that catch-22 of like, yes, Loki has, but this is a Loki who hasn't done all the terrible things. Yes, he's done mischievous things. Yes, this is the Loki from Thor 1. Yes, this is the Loki from Avengers 1. But it's not the same Loki that went through Dark World. The one that's responsible for his mom's death. Not the one that was from Ragnarok, which he didn't really do anything bad in Ragnarok. He also didn't do anything bad in Infinity War. He actually tried to do the good thing. So if Thor is able to forgive him, I think we can. But also, once again, that was a different Loki. This Loki has become his own person. But it is that thing of, it's that same conversation of identity of, can you look past who you were to be who you are now? And Loki can't quite, it's like no matter how much you try, you can't escape from your past because, it's that thing of, yes, so many different Lokis across the different timelines and all that are still Lokis to the core. And it's the $1 million question of, can a Loki change? And I believe they can because we've seen it already. Not even just this Loki, but even the Loki, yes, there were some stumbles along the way, but even the Loki we knew still trickster and can't erase that. Never, it's core of who he is. But that Loki did good on multiple occasions, Well, I guess the worst thing you could say is like, well, OG Loki that we follow throughout the movies, did pretend to be Odin for quite a while. So I guess that's what we can kind of, take away from that. So. But it's like, yeah, every version of you makes things worse. You made things worse for your mom, for Mobius, for B-15, and Loki doing everything he can be like, oh, no, thank you, Brad, thank you. He's like, you're right, I am a villain, I am this. So it's, trying to be intimidating, but you could tell it was scaring Brad because I think it is that moment because you can tell like he was angry. It did get under his skin. But Mobius is like, whoa, that was pretty tense. But it was actually Mobius who ended up snapping because of what X5 said. Brad's like, right, did you not even think to look for yourself? I mean, here you are. Like all of this is BS. None of it mattered. Our lives, who we are here. That's why he was like, I'm not X5 anymore. I am Brad. I found an identity. I found a life that actually was my own, not a life where I was kidnapped and force-fed this BS. But you, Mobius, you didn't go looking for your life. You stayed here. You're still Mobius. You're using the name that they gave you. That's not even your name. You haven't bothered looking for your life because that's all you are. It's like kind of like you and B-15. You're kind of nothing. You in particular are nothing. because neither one of them is really going off to kind of find out what their lives are. To be fair, there's other pressing matters, but Mobius snapped. And I love that it's like Loki there to calm him down. Like, are you okay? He's like, I'm not judging you. He's like, it sounds like you are. Wait, where are we? He's like, I don't know. I was following you. No, I was following you. Mobius, you were clearly in front of me. Even though I was like, yeah, how are he following you how are you following him when you're in front, Mobius? It's like, all right, let's go get some pie. He's like, key lime. And they sit down and like, it is this like small, like, yes, it's an extended moment, but it's still this small thing of them sitting down enjoying a pie. And it's like, dude, I'm not going to judge you. Fact of the matter is, I mean, when I let my anger get the best of me, when I went down during Avengers and ended up, trying to get the world under my control and try to use my enchantment on like, my powers on Tony, but he said no. And what did I do? What was it? Pushed him off a building or something like that. He was like, that wasn't, tactful. That was just my emotions getting the best of me. And it's like, oh, that's funny. Which you could make the argument, like, it's kind of funny too, like how that parallels him and Sylvie, because Sylvie let her emotions get the better of her because she was out for revenge, and her anger towards, He Who Remains made her decide to do what she did, right? So it's just that interesting parallel. And then, we had that nice moment with Mobius, that conversation of, well, why didn't you ever go looking? Because I think, because even Loki knows what his life would have been. Because it's not like I have to search the timeline. It's like, no, like I got shown in season 1 what my story would have been, where my story goes beyond Avengers, going to Thor 2, to Ragnarok, to Avengers Infinity War. Like, I know where my story goes and how it would end. So it's not like he has anything that like, oh, what would my life been? He knows. But Mobius, you don't. It's like, why didn't you ever go look? Because for him, it's like disappointing, sad, bad things I can handle. But what about the good? He's like, the last thing I need is that rattling off in my head, which understandable, because that's the thing of like, sometimes we as people can, like, just humans in general, it's a lot easier to dwell in the negative because, I mean, it sucks, but you're always scared with the positive because the other shoe could always drop. Because at least in negative, it's like, all right, at least, hey, I am who I am. It's better than the bad stuff I'd have to deal with. But what about the good in life? Because what if he looks on a timeline and finds out I could have had like a family, I could have had a jet ski, that's the thing. Everyone's like, oh yeah, upon finding out he's a variant, it's like, oh, he must have been connected to jet skis in some shape or form, considering he's in love with it. Because they even had that whole, I think someone had joked about like, oh yeah, what if like, one of Mobius's variants is, Owen Wilson. In a different timeline, he's Owen Wilson, the actor. I mean, wouldn't be too crazy considering like, hey, Kevin Bacon as the actor Kevin Bacon is canonical to the MCU as well as a few people because of like Queen Latifah is a thing in the MCU just because of the Guardians of the Galaxy holiday special, like just to kind of name a few. So it is that interesting situation, but I just thought that was such a beautiful moment for Mobius of like why he hasn't bothered looking because this is the only life he knows, and what good will looking for a life that will just make you second guess everything. It's like, at least I have this life. This is me. Because for him, it's like, the only way I can keep pushing forward is like not focusing on that. I got to focus on the mission, got to focus on this because this is my journey. This is my life. It might be fake. I might have had my memories wiped God knows how many times, but this is the only life I've ever known. And it is a scary thing to think about the life you could have lived. I mean, we'll see when it's all said and done what Mobius's journey looks like at the end of all of this, but either way, they went back to tackling the Brad situation differently. And it's like little trickster flair along with Mobius. I do love that. It feels like, I mean, we've seen like Mobius is can be very tricky. And I mean, they make, and that's what, I mean, I guess that feels the crime drama of it as well. It's like, it's like a cop show or whatever, because it is like a buddy cop show. But it's like they work together so well. I mean, it makes sense because Mobius, I mean, a lot of people know a lot about Loki, but he knows how to handle Loki. He knows, like, they have become, they're not just partners, they are friends. There is a legitimate friendship there. So the fact is that they like, all right, like you go in there, Loki, and you do your thing. He's like, no, Brad, you told me I was a villain. I have done a lot of bad things. I'm done playing here. I'm gonna just be a villain, and kept trapping him in that box thing and made it smaller and smaller because they ended up figuring out like, right, he must have found Sylvie, but wherever she is, he decided to abandon his mission. And the question is, why? And so they ended up getting the reveal of where Sylvie is. Like, I don't remember if they brought that up I don't think it was there last episode. Because like I said, I specifically noticed it this episode but to be fair, I did rewind to see what time it was and where they were. But they were in the UK in 77 at the beginning of the episode. But then I noticed the sacred timeline. I'm like, I don't think I noticed that last episode with the 82 Oklahoma where Sylvie was at the end of the last episode. So they end up going there. Even though I was like, why is Brad acting so skittish? I was like, why are you so weird right now? Understandably, Loki's like, he's trying to keep his calm and demeanor because he hasn't seen Sylvie. He saw her last episode, but that was in the future, which we still don't know how far in the future that was. Time is all relative because it's all happening all at once in a relative speaking manner. Once again, it also depends on which version of time you're looking at. Whether it's time is a straight line. It's like technically time isn't. It technically is because the loom makes it a straight line because the loom absorbs time and thins it out, and that's how time exists the way that we know it. At least that's how they're saying it works in this universe. Because but there's that conversation on, it's like time is always happening all at time. Like right now, the past is happening, and so is the future. It's all happening all at once. We're just at different points in time. I wonder what her life is like in Oklahoma. Once again, we have no idea how long she's been living in Oklahoma in that time. She even has a job at McDonald's. The fact of the matter is, we don't know, like, does she have her own house? Like, does she have friends? Because we only seen her interactions at McDonald's, not, like, outside of it. So, even enough to the point, at the end of the episode, she's talking to that kid, what's his name, Jake? And it's like, oh, is your mom about to pick you up? He's like, yeah. And she's like, he's like, are you going to be at work tomorrow? She's like, yeah, I am. And he's like, all right, see ya. So, when it's all said and done, Loki wants to talk to Sylvie, but he doesn't quite know what to say because she's still mad at him for choosing what he chose. Whatever the reason may be, it's like, you were willing to... I think there's a part of her that's still kind of thinking like, right, you did it for selfish reasons, but it's like, no, like this is bigger than us. This is bigger than our experiences. Like if we don't do something, like everything is going to be wiped from existence. Like, cause obviously like all the branches is being too much and the loom's going to like explode and it's going to destroy everything if they don't stop all this. But obviously for Loki, it's like you were at the TVA in the future. So, which I guess like, because he did finally tell them about He Who Remains and Renslayer, the recording he heard last episode in the past, but he didn't tell them about running into Sylvie in the future, I don't think. I think that's something, because he made sure to only have that conversation while him and Sylvie were talking. Brad and Mobius weren't around, which I love them having a meal. It's like, yeah, go ahead and enjoy your milkshake. He's like, think about it. The fact of the matter is I was interrogating you and see, we're sitting here having a meal like gentlemen, but he's and I love the whole thing of like, oh, like that movie, it seems scary. He's like, no, it's not scary. He's like, it's some kind of thriller. And it's like, I'm not going to cop you any tickets. You're going to have to get your own tickets. He's like, I'm not like siding you in. He's like, no, of course. Cause he's like, the movie seemed interesting. I saw the poster. Can I go see it or whatever? It was like, it was really interesting, but like, cause I understand where Sylvie's coming from because her circumstances are different from Loki. It's like, right. It's hard to let go of your pain and your anger when you've had to live on, Sylvie's in her, what? Like, well, let's assume like I think the actress is in her 30s, I think. It's like Sylvie's like, let's say she's been on a run for like decades. Once again, moving that line she said, making these lives for like just stopping at the end of like how she hid herself was in apocalypses. Like you've hid at the end of so many worlds and lives and all that. that will take a toll on you. And it's like the person who's kind of responsible for potentially the manipulations and building the TVA, the system that decided to take you from your timeline because you weren't meant to be. He's the one that kind of determined like what was sacred timeline. All of the timelines had to be pruned. So of course for her, it's like, I'm not going to blame her for like not letting go of that anger when you've been on a run that long. Like Loki didn't have to be on a run that long. You know, he got captured pretty immediately by the TVA. So their lives are very, very different in that regard. Once again, she was a little kid when she was taken by the TVA, you know, and her only crime was existing. So understandably, she's still mad at Loki with all of that because she still believes she did the right thing because she set all the different timelines free from He Who Remains thralls, you know? But we find out what this is all about, why Brad was acting so skittish, because Doxson's plan is to nuke every branching timeline all at once. And the process starts, and luckily, Sylvie was able to figure it out by reading his mind. So they go and try to stop Doxson. I even love that moment where it's like, all right, don't read too much into it. They join hands to kind of boost their power. And they stopped Doxson, but not in time because they ended up pruning most of the timelines. I mean, it is billions of lives. I mean, because every timeline is just a different Earth, and there's just like, I mean, and that's not even just talking about Earth. It's not even billions of lives. It's probably trillions even, because you're talking about each timeline. There's different worlds, there are different people. There's so many lives that were lost, and it's just, that's devastating to end on the episode on that, of just like all these different timelines destroyed. Because once again, it put things in perspective. You didn't really think about it too much during season 1, I don't think. Because you're just like, right, the timeline's being reset. It's like, cool. Like, because to be fair, none of these branches really had too much of a time to grow because they never expanded beyond that. But it's still like, it's very morbid to say this, but it's like, they basically gutted all these timelines before they left the crib. It's a morbid, super effed up metaphor, but, you know, I think it's still an apt one regardless. But now these branches all had a chance to grow. They were beyond the red lines, and still they ended up getting pruned and destroyed. And even like the effect on the screen where you see the timelines like receding a little bit, but it's just like you see that little gray area of the branch because they look so like, it's like the branches were like snapped, and it's just like, yep, the broken off piece is gone, and it's not even growing anymore. In fact, instead of growing, it's receding, and it's just sad. And just that look on B-15's face when it's all said and done, you know? Because I guess that's why Brad up and left, because he found a life for himself during all of this, and it's just like, I guess he went along with the plan, but up to a point where it's just kind of like, that's why he made sure to pick a life on the sacred timeline so that he could keep it. But it's just, I don't think he was as down for the whole plan as he thought he was. But it's because it's like, right, because of what B-15 said last episode, I do think it did eventually, like, it did kind of sink in, especially when Doxson was making her plan. But that's why he didn't want to be a part of killing, like, genociding. It legitimately is that. It's genocide. Like, you genocided so many different lives. Like, regardless of, like, the time. Because for Doxson, it's like, it's kind of like Mobius, but she wanted the extremist end of it, where it's like, no, this is our job, this is our mission. It may be BS, it may be all, but this is all we know, so I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. Whereas like B-15 is like, no, we need to change, and her refusal to change. And that's even where Sylvie is at the end of the episode, because Loki made the point that, hey, the TVA is the only thing standing between like He Who Remains and all his variants. But for her, it's like, look, nothing's changed. Like, yeah, you're supposed to be the last line of defense. The TVA is broken. Like, the fact is you're not even all on the same wavelength. Her and her dissenters are like a rogue group, but that's still like quite a few that were rogue. I mean, there was some that were just like taken down. We saw at least Loki prune at least one of the TVA agents, so kind of sucks, but a lot of them were arrested. Some did escape. So there probably will be, they might all pull a Brad and just kind of hide out on the timeline, or they might try and, keep doing what they're doing. I mean, without Doxson leading the charge, they probably won't be able to, because they're probably going to be constantly on the run. So I'm assuming a lot of them will probably settle down, maybe, because if they don't, they'll get captured again. But I don't know. Like I said, it's just that gut-wrenching moment at the end of the episode where it's just like they failed, and it's like you were hoping. I mean, a lot of those branches were already being destroyed by the time they found out, but it's still a thing of, man, that's rough, dude. To end on the episode on such a tragic note. I mean, maybe arguably it helps because it's like, well, with a sacred timeline in play, then maybe you don't have to worry about the different kings. But once again, we are talking about the distinction between like alternate timelines versus different universes. Different universes is a different conversation than actual. Well, because no, the whole point was by reigning in the timeline, he's dealing with his other variants, but his other variants could be outside of the time. Like I said, that still is the tricky thing of like, there is a distinction supposed to be, but sometimes I feel like they become interchangeable. Alternate timelines versus alternate dimensions. They are not the same. So branching timelines doesn't equate. I mean, but that was also Kang's justification. Like by trimming the branches, I prevent alternate timelines of myself breaking through the space time and, it turning into a full multiversal war. I mean, once again, we see, but they probably exist outside of time. That area all the Kangs were at the end of Quantumania is most likely kind of almost like, the place at the end of time. It's probably like that in the TVA. They exist outside of time. So maybe they made a little haven for themselves like that. Because we also, once again, I'd assume still that the quantum realm, that I don't know if that really got answered whether or not the quantum realm, it technically, I guess, exists outside of time. I mean, because time kind of pauses. Well, to some extent, because it's like, well, because obviously Janet aged and so did Scott, because he was in there for 5 years, but it felt like minutes for him. So, to be fair, Janet was in there for decades, and plus time probably worked a little differently in there too. That's a whole thing, right? Not something we fully explored, and Quantumania didn't fully give us an answer to that, so kind of relevant, but I'd also kind of not here nor there. But either way, what I do think is interesting is Sylvie's still holding on to He Who Remains device. I'm wondering if that has something to do with Loki's, because I didn't think about that until like at the end of the episode. I mean, at the beginning of the episode when they're recapping everything, and we see Sylvie push him through a time portal, but I think she was holding that device of Kang's, or He Who Remains, that I'm wondering, is that why the time slipping worked the way it did? Because she was holding that, she was at the end of time, and she pushed him through one of those time portals. So maybe the culmination of all of that is what gave Loki his time slipping. I don't know. And it's been cured, or has it? Because someone had theorized, like, could he potentially end up getting it back? I don't know if that's the case. Maybe that's based on something that happens in the trailer, but once again, I haven't seen the trailer. I don't want to watch the trailer, so. But the fact is, I think what Loki said, because we don't know, she probably got a look inside of Loki's head when they joined hands. She probably did get a look inside of his head and saw what he saw. So, because at the end, she is probably thinking about it, because it probably was nice seeing him again, regardless of like her feelings. Like, her feelings are complicated, as Moby's kind of put it. Yeah, it's a complicated situation. There's a lot of history and complicated stuff there, but I think it's like, because of how pissed she is about what Loki did, but she still cares about him because that kiss did still matter. And then thinking about the timeline being what it is, and it's like, am I just going to sit here and enjoy my life when they're like, so many other variants who are going through what I'm going through and having their lives ripped away from them? Am I just going to sit on the sidelines and let that happen and not fight? I think a lot of that's kind of rummaging through her mind, and that's where we are at the end of the episode. Not unless there's actually a little bit more that Sylvie knows that we as the audience just don't know yet, or at least she doesn't let Loki and the TVA know. It's definitely going to be interesting to see where the next episode takes us with all of this. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.